It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the Gill's Connections, Gill's Athletics, Mike Cunningham. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome, Brandon, man. I'm so happy to be here, and honestly, just so ecstatic you would invite me onto the podcast, man. It's a real privilege.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to get started in covering track and field?
Yeah, my whole life has been track and field. So I was a very terrible athlete in high school, then actually started coaching track and field right outside of high school. So I coached for 10 years on the college level. My last place was at Mississippi State. And then I came to Gill, and through my time here at Gill, we're always trying to find ways to create value for our customers, our coaches that are out there. And so right before COVID, January of 2020, decided I'd listened to a lot of podcasts. I'd done my own personal podcast to kind of learn the ropes, if you will. And I decided, you know what, we're just going to start interviewing coaches, uplifting and honoring their journeys because they're all super unique. And so I remember the very first one, we put a phone in between us and hit record, and we just did it right in his office to get it started. And it's been 200 plus episodes since then. We've gotten a little better than just the phone.
Of course, what was that experience like first getting started and being a college track coach and then transferring over into the podcast industry?
Yeah, I don't think I realized it while I was coaching, just how special all coaches are, but I focus specifically on track and field, just how special they are. You've heard that saying, a coach will impact the lives of a child or of more kids than a teacher, or whatever that saying is. And it's true if you think about maybe your own sport experience and other people out there, your sport experience. A coach it's different. They have a different impact on you than maybe sometimes your own parents. And so I don't think I realized that while I was coaching, but as I, got older and was away from being an actual coach and, was working with coaches in the track and field equipment world, you would just hear stories and you would see kids and, their eyes would light up when a coach would walk onto the track, or they would tell a story about how, if this coach didn't take a chance on me, I wouldn't have gone to college. And it just made me realize, man, these guys and gals out there are special. While they wear that title of coach, they're also moms and dads and teachers and, a whole bunch of side hustles. They're amazing people. Brandon, here's something we've explored on our podcast. The title coach, and maybe you can help because I've never found a third one. There's only two jobs in this world where your title follows you everywhere. So one is coach, right? Like if your neighbor is a coach, you probably call your neighbor, hey, Coach Bob, how's it going? You're not even in their sport, but it's just your neighbor and he's a coach. So I'm calling him Coach Bob. The other one is doctor, right? If you have a doctor in your neighborhood, you certainly don't call Sally, oh, hey, Dr. Sally, how's everything going? No other job title. You don't call your accountant Jim. You don't call the local grocery store owner, owner Sal, owner Tim. It's a really special title that follows you everywhere. And I just became real passionate about helping these people who choose to be track coaches to focus on some other things that are as important, their financial health, their mental health, their relationship health, et cetera. And so doing the podcast has really been educational for me, to sit down. Our podcast is hard to listen to. It's an hour and 45 minutes on average. We've gone as long as 3 hours, if you can believe that. So it's hard to listen to and hard to actually, record. We're getting pretty in depth into your journey. And so I really sit in a really special seat where I get to listen to these men and women from around the country, sometimes from around the world, and hear how they got into coaching all the way to where they are today, the mentors along the way, the mistakes they've made, the lessons learned. And it's been, it continues to be just extremely humbling to listen to these stories and learn from them.
Of course, how did you come up with the name of your podcast, The Gill's Connections?
Yeah, so it's the Gill Athletics, for the official title for SEO and everything, right? It's the Gill Athletics Track and Field Connections podcast. We colloquially call ourselves the Gill Connections podcast, because Gill Athletics is a track and field equipment manufacturer, so that's who interacts with us as other track geeks like us, right? And when I was thinking about a name for the podcast, I went through a lot of different iterations, right? Just thinking about what we wanted to, how we wanted to portray the value that we wanted to give. I almost called it the Gill Athletics Shout Out podcast, because I love when a coach comes on and shouts out the coach that was a big mentor for them. So I love that. But then I started thinking, I don't really concern myself where a coach is coaching at. And what I mean by that is I don't think the Power 5 coach, the person who's a track coach at a Power 5 school, is any more important than the local high school track and field coach. They're very extremely valuable people. The positive impact that they make on young people is invaluable. So whether they're doing it for 30 kids at local Muhammad Seymour High School, my local high school here, or they're doing it at the University of Florida, that means nothing to me. They are making positive impacts. It doesn't matter what's across their chest. So I wanted to be able to connect those people, to help people see that, Tina over here, the coach at our high school, she is doing amazing work. She is a teacher, coaching, 40 kids on the team, helping some of them go on to college. Not all of them do, but helping them, create self-esteem and self-worth, get better physically. That's amazing. And then my buddy over here at the University of Florida, Mouse Holloway, amazing coach. He is doing the same thing. He is coaching 18 to 22-year-olds. 90%, 99% of his kids also are not going pro, even though he has a ton of kids that go pro in track and field. But the impact that he's making on his young men and women is equally what Tina is doing over here on the high school level. So trying to connect those together, and so people can see, you can become Mouse if you want. You can become the head coach of University of Florida one day. You're gonna have to work for it and catch some breaks, but it doesn't make him more important than any other coach out there. They're all doing really amazing, really life-changing, societal, positive type work.
Of course, what has that experience been like, obviously getting to interview those high school coaches, but also interviewing those college coaches out there?
It's humbling. Before, even though if I would have looked at my own experience and how I got into coaching and how I got into college coaching, I didn't take the quote unquote traditional path. But what I'm really finding out, and I guess, maybe it took me 200 episodes to figure this out, there is no traditional path to get into coaching. Some of these coaches were amazing athletes, and that was how they figured out they were going to coach track. Others didn't even do track in high school or college, and they've become high school or college coaches. So, to be able to hear each one's unique journey and realize that while we're talking about their track journey, there's people that are along the way, meaning, sometimes they're married, sometimes they have children, they obviously have moms and dads at some point. That all plays into where they're going, where they're moving to, salaries that they make, decisions that they make with their kids in regards to captainship and recruiting, things like that. It is amazing to hear everybody's story and just how unique each single we're on episode 220 something. Every single one of those 220 different people, not a single carbon copy on how they got into coaching and where they are today.
Of course, how do you go about finding the guests that you have had the privilege of interviewing?
Yeah, I coached for 10 years. So I knew a lot of coaches right there, right? But that was 17 years ago. So, a lot of those coaches have aged out. They've retired. But now being in the position that I have here at Gill Athletics, we're the world's oldest and world's largest track manufacturer. So we talk to pretty much every coach in this country in some form or fashion to sell them products, right? They buy out pro vault pits and hurdles and vaulting poles, all that kind of fun stuff. So I just ask, right? So kind of the three ways we get people on our podcast is, one, I just reach out. Maybe it's someone I don't even know, but I heard an interesting story, or maybe they work at a school that I thought was kind of cool. I'll just reach out. Hey, I host this podcast. It's crazy, I know, but would you like to be a guest? Two, a lot of referrals, especially once we started getting cooking, right? Like after 100 episodes, we get a lot of referrals. Hey, my friend at such and such school has a cool story. You might be interested in them. And then third, sometimes they just reach out to me. Sometimes people, being able to share their story is kind of cathartic. Like the number one comment I get after we stop recording is, hey, Mike, that was a lot of fun. Like, I haven't thought about those stories in a long time, or I haven't thought about, my college coach in a long time. There are a lot of good feelings. They're so busy on a day-to-day basis. They sometimes forget to stop and think about all the amazing things that they've done up to this point, or the amazing people that have been in their lives. And so, sometimes it's just kind of cathartic to be able to tell your story and where you are in today's world.
Who are some of the guests that you have had the privilege of interviewing as coaches?
Oh man, like some of my favorites.
Mhm.
Oh man, number one has to be, and it's our number one most listened to episode, is Boo Schexnayder. Boo has been a coach at many, many places, but he's probably most known for being a coach at LSU. Longtime Olympic coach, coached many, many Olympians. He was my mentor when I was coaching. So it was a little nerve wracking, Brandon, to be honest with you, because here's this guy who's my mentor. This guy did everything for me. He was amazing for me. And here I have this responsibility to interview him and help him share his story. It was a little nerve wracking. Like, I want to do I want to do a great job with all of our guests. I really wanted to do a good job with my mentor, right? And he knocked it out of the park. He did absolutely amazing. So, Boo Schexnayder has been great. One that touched me kind of personally, like, it's helped me in my own life and in business life, as another Olympic coach, Brooks Johnson. Brooks, formerly of University of Florida and Stanford University. He brought into the podcast the saying, if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. Now, he got that from his good friend George Williams, longtime coach at St. Augustine's there in North Carolina. Are you go? What are you? Are you go Tar Heels? What are you there, North Carolina boy?
Go Tar Heels.
All right, go Tar Heels. Well, this is St. Augustine's longtime coach, many, many times Olympic coach, things like that. And that's his saying is, if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play. Now, what they were talking about is, it's very easy as a coach to look at another athlete, someone else's athlete, and whether they're injured or not running well, and say, oh, well, if they were with me, they'd be running faster or throwing farther or whatnot, right? Well, if you're not in the huddle, you don't know the play, meaning you don't know if that kid's injured. You don't know if that kid is homesick. Who are you to judge? And so through interviewing Brooks and eventually George as well, and hearing that and hearing how they use that in their daily lives, it really, like, it changed me, Brandon. Like, I would be the guy who maybe like everybody else, I don't know if that's fair to say or not, but I'd be judgy. I'd be like, oh, that coach should be doing better. I'd even put it in my own personal life. Someone would cut me off and I'd be very upset at them, right? And now it has helped me to take a step back and be like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not in the huddle, so I don't know the play. So that coach that I, from the outside, I'm like, man, why are they not doing better? Well, gosh, maybe they have no scholarships. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they're going through a sickness. I don't know. I'm not in the huddle, right? I don't know the play. So it allows me to be much more empathetic towards people. That person that cuts me off in traffic, same thing. They may have just found out that their child is in the hospital. They may have just found out they lost their job. I don't know. So why should I judge? I should just have more empathy of like, man, something's going on with that person for them to do that, for them to be a jerk and cut me off. So that really, Brooks and George, God love them. They really affected me personally and have really helped me be much more empathetic and much less judgy, if you will.
Of course, what does that process look like for you to pick the college coaches that you have had the privilege of interviewing?
Yeah, real proud that we have had a coach on all levels on our podcast. So we've had middle school coaches, high school coaches, college from every division, NAIA, NCAA, JUCO, et cetera, and professional coaches, and even some international coaches as well. And, for us, that process is I reach out, I email them. And I kind of have a what to expect sheet that I put in the email of like, here's what to expect if you choose to be on the podcast, like for you to have, we're going to do it through Zoom and all that kind of stuff. But then I always, because I never want to, not offend people. That's not the right word. I don't want to like pressure people. So I give them an easy out. Every person that I invite on the podcast, my email, my invite ends with, hey, I realize this is not everyone's cup of tea. Not everyone wants to spill their life to me of all people. And it's going to be listened to by thousands of people, by the way. So you best be prepared that, you're going to hear from some people, good and or bad. So I give them an out. I go, hey, I realize this is not everybody's cup of tea. If you have zero interest in this, literally just shoot me back a no, and I'll never bug, like I'm not here to bug you about it. I'll still think of you as the rock star that you are, because you are a rock star. You're a track coach. You are a rock star in my life. So whether you choose to or not to be on this podcast, that's irrelevant of what I think about you as a person. So, and even with that great non-pressure invite, I still get turned down because it's not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody wants to get on here. And again, I told you it's hard to record, right? We ask for 2 hours of your time. Not everybody has that, especially a busy track and field coach.
Of course, who are some of the Olympian coaches that you've had the privilege of interviewing?
Yeah, I mentioned, 3 great ones there, right? And Boo Schexnayder, Brooks Johnson, George Williams. They've coached many Olympians. This year, our highlight guest, every season, so in January, I try to have an extra special person, maybe someone who's retired or something like that. And this person hasn't retired, but Dan Paff was kind of our January kickoff season for. He's coached many Olympians, more than I could count. Karen Dennis, now retired from Ohio State, many Olympians. It's quite amazing. When you think about that term Olympian, that's a really small fraternity to be in. And we've had people like Jeff Hartwig, 2-time Olympic pole vaulter, John Godina, a good friend. He's made 4 Olympic teams. I mean, that's to make one Olympic team. You're in, remember, it's never formally Olympian. You are always an Olympian because it's that hard to make, right? So making one Olympic team is out of this world, crazy nuts. A guy like John Godina, who's made it 4 times. I can't even comprehend that. And it's just so awesome to be able to hear their story and the sacrifices that they've made to make those teams, and for the coaches who have coached them and what sacrifices they've made for that as well.
Of course, what has that experience been like, obviously getting to hear those Olympians' stories on how they have performed on the Olympic stage, the biggest stage of them all?
Yeah, jealousy, right? I was a track athlete. Come on, we all grew up. We wanted to be in the Olympics if we were a track athlete. I mean, that is the big #1 overall track meet in the world. So, I lacked several things that stopped me from going to the Olympics. One was talent. That was I didn't have that, so that's strike #1. 2, I didn't work very hard when I was a track athlete either. So it was destiny for me not to ever go to the Olympics to do that. So jealousy, man, when you look at, guys like Jeff and John, and a good friend of mine is Justin Gatlin, I go back to that word sacrifice, the sacrifices that they make to hit that 1% of 1% of 1% level is, it's phenomenal. And so to hear their stories, to know the work that they've put in, to know the coaches that have poured into them, to know, we don't like to admit this out publicly a lot of times, but to know some of the luck that also occurred to help them. We all, we don't like to talk about getting lucky. We like to think it's all on us, but we have our breaks every once in a while, right? So to hear the luck factor involved as well, the, right time, right place, it's amazing. It really is. I sometimes have to pinch myself and realize, like, holy crap, I get paid to do, like, this is my job. Like, I get to listen and learn from amazing coaches around the country. Get out of here. I've hit my own personal Olympics when it comes to career.
Of course, what are some of your favorite disciplines of interviewing coaches from?
Like throws coaches, track coach, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. I must answer that a little bit different way. I enjoy them all. I was a sprints, hurdles, jumps coach, so I tend to know a little bit more about what they're going through and, the career paths. I coached for 10 years and was at 5 different places, so I know about job hopping and all that kind of stuff. I coached in the SEC, so I know about, Power 5. But I think the 2 people I'd answer that, Brandon, is one, I think I really like interviewing people that coach things that I have no clue about. So distance coaches, specifically throws coaches, middle school or summer youth coaches. I just know nothing about those. I never did it. And so it just really allows me to keep my curiosity cap on, and I get to keep asking questions. Well, why'd you do that? Well, where'd you go next? And how did you, what made you think you could do that? I just get to keep asking questions. And then the other way I'd answer that too, Brandon, is, out of the different stratum, so Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA, high school, et cetera, Division 3 coaches, like I kind of feel like they've cracked the cheat code for college track and field coaching. they always seem a little bit happier than all my other college coaches out there. You know, they start practice later. They don't have to recruit based on athletic scholarship. They've definitely got their own stressors and hurdles to overcome. But man, they just, I don't know, man, those D3 coaches, if I'd have kept coaching, this would be like my 28th year, which is crazy. I know I don't look that old, Brandon, but it'd be like, I'd be circling on my 30th year. And I wonder sometimes, I'm like, if I'd kept coaching, would I have learned by now? Would I realized like, oh, maybe D3, maybe that's the place to be? Because man, they're just, those guys and gals, they're just happier. There's something different with them.
What is that experience like, obviously getting to learn those different areas? So, for example, interviewing those throwing coaches and learning about shot put, javelin, stuff like that.
Yeah, you know, we don't talk about the X's and O's, right? Because one, I haven't coached in 17, 18 years. It'd be a little unauthentic for me to talk about coaching. Plus, there's a lot of other great podcast, video series, articles on how to coach someone to jump farther, throw farther, etc. So for me, I'm more focused on like why and how. So why are you where you're at now? How did you get there? Right. So you've chosen, if I'm talking to someone on the NAIA levels, like, well, you've chosen to be at an NAIA school as compared to a NCAA school or a high school coach, et cetera. Why? Like why at this place today? Or, you know, as we're going through their journey. And then how? Like, did you blind apply for the job? Like just send a random resume in? Did you know someone at that place already? Did you go to school there? Are you an alum? I'm always curious of just how they've cracked that code of actually getting the job, because there's many ways to get a job in the college track and field coaching world. So I'm always like learning just kind of how and why they did to their different places.
Of course, as you talk about the alumni coaches, what is that experience like getting to interview those alumni coaches that are at the alumni that they compete in?
Yeah, I have a special place in my heart for alums who coach at their alma mater. Someone who a strength of mine when I coached was recruiting. So I know, the game, or at least I know the game 17 years ago. It's definitely changed. I coached before there was really social media and a cell phone in everybody's hand, and definitely before NIL and, I'm sorry, NLI and all that kind of stuff. So I really don't know what they're going through. But I know what recruiting is. And so when I think about a coach and they're coaching at their alma mater, so they went to school there and they're calling up a recruit, and I compare them to another coach calling from XYZ school. Well, man, how authentic is it for the alum when they talk to that boy or girl about coming to that school and how special it is and how great it is? It's like, you want to know how I can prove to you how great it is? I went to school here. Like I chose this school out of all the other schools around the country. Like that's special, and it's only authentic if you went to school there. Like if I was being recruited, if my kids ever somehow overcome my genetic lack of discipline for them and get recruited, one of the first questions I'm going to ask is like, okay, so you coach at such and such school, but you went to this other school. Why aren't you back there? If that school was so great, like why is this school, but why didn't you go to school here? Like I'll question someone, like, why are you here if that school was so great for you? So alums at their alma mater, man, that's a special thing in my heart.
Of course, who would be your dream interview to interview?
Oh man, my dream interview. I get a little peeved when I'm watching a track meet. Not peeved, that's a strong word. Agitated might be a better word. When they interview athletes at all levels, they rarely say, hey, and thanks to my coach, Michelle, she was, instrumental in what we've done. Thanks to my coach, Larry, he was amazing. And I'm always kind of begging, like when I see, especially a elite meets, like, thank your coach. You're with that guy or gal for a long time. Like they have helped you get, like, we need to know who they are. It's, it's not like football where I know who the head coach of the Cowboys or the Dolphins are. I don't know who the pro coaches are because they're not attached to a school. So I'd like to do a few more elite coaches, to be honest with you. Kind of my hit list, if you will, kind of the four and probably, I know some of these guys and gals, so probably maybe a little bit I just need to reach out. But Lance Brahman, who coaches a lot of Adidas athletes, I actually coached against him when I was a junior college coach. Lance would be awesome. His dad is a Hall of Fame high school coach in Florida, so he would be great. Tandra Buford Bailey, who used to be the head coach here at Illinois, now she also the head coach down in Texas. She's down in Texas running a professional group. She's amazing. She's had many Olympians, does an awesome job. And then the two coaches that, if you want to win a gold medal, these are kind of the coaches you go to in certain events, John Smith and Bob Kersey, legendary coaches. They're probably both in their 60s, maybe 70s at this point, and have done it all. They've seen, I think those two have put someone on the Olympic team for Team USA every Olympic since like 1976 or something like that. It's something absurd. But they're also very private people. Rarely do you see them give interviews, and I just don't have contacts with them, unfortunately. But I would love that. Would be kind of like does Mount Rushmore have 4 people? That'd be like my elite coaching Mount Rushmore: Lance Brahman, Tanja Buford Bailey, John Smith, and Bobby Kersey.
Of course, who would be your ideal interviews on the Olympic side and your dream interviews for the Olympic side that are athletes?
Athletes, yeah. I'm going to take the easy way out here, and it's really funny. I kind of did interview him, but it was for my own personal when I was learning. But when I was going to bring the idea of a podcast to Gill Athletics, I knew I had to know how to podcast first. I couldn't just say, hey, we should do a podcast. And they're like, cool, how do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. So I ran my own podcast because I have a pretty varied background of people that I know, right? So I did, I'm a complete ripoff artist. So I just did the Mike Cunnigham experience. Stop me if you've heard a podcast that sounds very similar to that name, right? Joe Rogan. And so I interviewed, my very first one was Justin Gatlin because he was a gold medalist. And, I knew that would, people would listen to that. And I interviewed a member of the band All for One, a real famous nuisance chef down in Alabama that I went to high school with, a doula, just all these different a watchmaker, all these people that I know from my different passions and curiosities in life. But I haven't interviewed Justin for our podcast. And he's someone, I've known him since he was 16, 17 years old, was one of the first people to recruit him out of high school. And he's had some pretty famous coaches himself and has done an amazing job. So I need to just like buckle down and get him on the podcast. I know him. We're such good friends. If I just said the words that, hey man, next Tuesday, let's go. If his schedule was open, we would. I just need to kind of bite the bullet and do it. I'm having so much fun interviewing all these other track coaches. I gotta fit him into my schedule.
Of course, what are some of your favorite memories and moments doing the podcast?
Oh man, two strike out to me, stick out immediately. One is Karen Dennis, mentioned she's now retired, former head coach of Ohio State and UNLV. When we do our podcast, there's no preset questions. You get to tell the story. It's your story, right? So I allow you to tell the story how you want to tell it. So you can say what you want or not say what you want. And here I am interviewing Karen Smith while she was the head coach at Ohio State, amazing coach, ran at Michigan State, just amazing person. And she's at UNLV and she goes from UNLV to Ohio State. And I ask what I think is a fairly softball question of like, hey, why did you leave UNLV to come to Ohio State? Now, there's a lot of obvious answers, right? Ohio State's bigger, better brand, whatever, than UNLV. She was from the Midwest. She was from Michigan. So, it's closer to home, all this kind of stuff, right? And she answers, but this blew me away, Brandon. This showed me her authenticity and humbleness. She goes, well, I left UNLV because I was fired. And I was just like, Karen, you didn't have to say that. Like, you could have just said I left. And so, really taught me a lesson about, like I asked her, I was like, well, you didn't have to say that, Karen. Why? Like, I appreciate the openness and honesty, but that no one likes to admit they got fired. Why would you say that? And she's like, I think it's important for people to know that bad things can happen, whether you are at fault or not. Bad things can happen to you and good things can still come from that. And I was like, wow, it blew me away. I mean, again, just blew me away. It was quite amazing. And then the other, just humbling moment hearing these stories. It's an episode that actually is in the can. It'll publish here in another week or so. This coach opens up about his battle with alcoholism. And again, completely unprompted. You get to tell your story how you want to tell your story. And, he opens up about, he's getting close to 10 years sober. Some of the mistakes that were made under the influence. And, it touched me because, when I hear a coach talking about that, whether they got fired or they're struggling with alcoholism or other demons, what I absolutely know is someone listening to that episode is also going through that. And sometimes we feel like we're very alone in this world. And we forget that there are other people like us. There are other people who like us. And so I just know, it's not even a think. I know that young man's story, when it publishes, someone's going to hear that and it's going to change their life. They're going to realize, whether they say it something that sounds a little flippantly, whether they say, hey, you know what, if that guy can get sober, then I can get sober. It's actually more of a positive statement. It's like, hey, wow, you can do it. Well, that gives me hope and belief that I can do it. And I just know because of that young man's openness, authenticity, humbleness, to tell that story, could be seen as a very embarrassing story. You're admitting a weakness, right? I know he is going to do so much good by bearing his soul and telling that story that other people, he's going to help other people. And I'm proud to be the conduit. I mean, I'm just the guy who presses record and asks the questions. Someone like him has to tell that story. And I'm very proud to be able to share that story with others and help people out.
What are some of the things that you have learned that you didn't know before getting started?
How hard it would be to schedule people. I kind of knew it. We're busy people. I'm busy. I travel 100 plus nights a year. Our track coaches in high school are teachers. Our track coaches in college are traveling and recruiting themselves. So sometimes it's a little bit of a harder process. That to me is, I always tell people when they say they're agreeing to be on the show, now's the hard part, and that's scheduling. That's the number one hard part. Once we get on the show, that's the easy part, but the actual scheduling. And then the other thing is, I'm actually still blown away, even after 220 something and no plans to stop. We do 52 a year. We'll hit episode 10,000 one day here. My voice will probably be a little different at 10,000, but I'll be a little older. But I am amazed that people say yes to be on the show. You get nothing from it. You don't get any, we don't pay for guests. We don't, none of that, so you get something intrinsically, but you get nothing extrinsically. And so I'm always humbled when someone does say yes, to, sit down with me for 2 hours and talk about, their bio basically, and, their mentors, along the way. So that has been a cool lesson that people, this is, this is what's going to be cool. And your show here, Brandon, is the exact same. Is what you're building and what we're building on the Gill Athletics Connections podcast is evergreen material. Meaning, when we stop doing this one day, whether God chooses to make us stop because we die or whatever, right? So our podcast, your YouTube videos, as long as you don't take them down, Brandon, they'll live forever. Someone 30 years from now will be able to go and check out your page, your videos, and watch some amazing interviews. You just had the Pitt State coach on there. He's done an amazing job with his athletes. You had Maggie Malone, one of our best javelin throwers here in America. Someone will be able to come back 30. Here you go. This will blow you away. Those two people I just mentioned, and I'm sorry, my name is blanking, my Pitt State guy, and Maggie Malone. If they choose to have children, their children one day as adults, as 30-year-old adults, will be able to come back and see what was mom like as a 30-year-old? What was dad like as a 30-year-old? We don't have that. You don't have that for your parents. I don't have that for my parents. That's a real gift. That's evergreen material. We're going to build for our show, we're building a repository of coaches capsulizing their lives, their biographies, and someone 30 years from now, I wish I was able to go to Frank Gaglione back in the day and find out what his story was, but we didn't have recording devices back then. We've got them now, and I think guys like you, and I'm humbled to serve on the track and field coaching side, we have a responsibility to capture this amazing, amazing history for generations forward. And we're never going to get the thanks because we're going to be in the grave one day. But what we're doing with these bios is It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. It can't be understated what it's going to be able to help generations forward see how to become an Olympian from your show, how to be a track coach from my show. It's amazing. It's fantastic. And it's an awesome responsibility that I don't take lightly. And I know you don't either, Brandon.
What are some of your future plans with the podcast moving forward?
Yeah. Keep it going for one, right? It's weekly, which is a lot easier than daily, my friend. But weekly, so I want to keep that going. I've been blessed that we've not had we haven't broken the streak. Every Monday is a new episode. We continue to find new and cool, fun bonus things to do. So for a long time, we were running the audio only version of a pretty popular YouTube show called the Athletics LLC. We'd run that as bonus material. I do a lot of hosting and Q&A sessions at different track and field clinics and shows and things like that. So we continue to pull audio from that to bring value to our audience. We had a fun thing we did last year at the big college convention show where we did a live version of the podcast. We're going to do that again. And we're actually, no one knows this. This is actually breaking. No one actually knows this, Brandon. So here's your breaking. You get the exclusive right here. We're actually going to be at the Prefontaine Classic in September. It's the Diamond League World Final. So I'd call that the Diamond League Final, the number 3 meet in the world. So you have the Olympics, the World Champs, and then the Diamond League Final. We're going to be at the Diamond League Final, and we're going to do another live version of the Gill Athletics Connections podcast. So I'd like to do things like that to bring again, it's all about value. How can I bring value to those who choose to listen or watch our show on YouTube? And I think those are the thoughts that are always in my head is, what else can I do? What else can I do? What else can I do for value for them?
Of course, with events like that, are there any future plans in the books to go to the Olympics in LA in 2028 when it comes to LA?
At first, because I always get ahead of myself. I heard Olympics and I was like, no, I will never go to the Olympics. It's a madhouse. Oh, it's crazy. I have a much better seat watching it on TV in my room, right? But you brought up a great point. LA 28, right? I mean, gosh, I'm going to Eugene here soon. That's West Coast. That's not that far from LA. I might not have an excuse not to be at LA 28. So, I am a planner, but I'm not that much of a planner just yet. So I'm not 5 years ahead of schedule on what I'm doing, but that would be an excellent place to do some, I'd like to do some like man on the street type of interviews as well, where you just have the mic and, you're asking quick questions and stuff like that. I would like to do some fun stuff like that at different places. Maybe LA 28 will be the right place to do it.
What advice would you give those people out there that are looking to get into the podcast industry and covering sports such as track and field?
Yeah, easy. So I actually also teach a podcasting 101 class for a junior college. I've really, really sunk my teeth into podcasting. I think of podcasting as no different than any other social media channel. And what I mean by that is, Brandon, if you were to come up to me and say, "Hey, Mike, do you think I should open up a Twitter account?" I would say, "Yeah, of course. Of course you should. What do you mean? There's no harm. Do it. Big deal. If you put something stupid out there and no one reads it, no one reads it anyway, bro. Who cares, right?" I think of that exact the same way in podcasting. So I get a lot of, specifically, so I've earned the nickname, the Podfather of track and field. Now there is a real Podfather, if you know your history, of course. There's a real person that, who invented podcast. I'm the Podfather of the track and field niche. And so I get a lot of people asking me, hey, for advice and how you do it. And I started coaching a junior college or teaching a junior college podcasting 101. I think if you want a podcast, I think you 100% should start a podcast. Perfectionism is what stops us the most. And perfectionism is like this really evil thing that's dressed up in a suit and tie. We think it's the right thing to be. Right, to be perfectionist. Well, perfectionism is just your excuse to not get anything started. Nothing's perfect, right? Brandon, you've done 1,000 of these things. I would have to imagine if I went back to episode number 1 and compared it to your episode number 1,000, there would be some fairly night and day. Like, wow, Brandon, wow, you messed this up. But you overcame. It's the same thing. You go back to episode 1 for us. Oh my, it is nowhere near as good as episode 200. You have to get started. If you want to do a podcast, do it. weirdly, in podcast world, we think if we don't have 1,000 downloads, we have failed. We don't think of that in social media. If you put out a tweet and 100 people see it, that's pretty good. That's success. But not in podcast world. 1 million people have to listen to us. Bullcrap. If you have an opinion, if you have some value to bring to others in an audio format, so in a podcast or in a video audio format like here on YouTube, do it. Start it. Whatever you think the idea is, get started. You'll get better as you go along. Do not wait for the perfect opportunity, because that does not exist. Out of everybody that I've helped counsel to start a podcast, the number one reason for the people who never actually started was they were waiting for the perfect moment. They were waiting for the perfect equipment. They were waiting for the perfect name, all this stuff. And I'm like, well, all you did was just waste time. You've actually stopped. You actually did not give value to people that you had value to give, and you decided not to give it to them because you were worried about a podcast name. You can change that. No big deal. So my number one advice for everybody when I teach the class, everybody, it's always get started. Once you get started, it becomes a lot easier. But get episode 1 out. Actually, do your trailer first, then get your episode 1 out, and then episode 2, 3, 4, 5. Next thing you know, it'll be episode 200, and you'll be way, way better off than you were at episode 1. But you got to get started.
What advice would you give those people that are in the podcast world that are looking to interview college coaches and professional athletes like me and you have before?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think sometimes imposter syndrome gets in our way. And so we think like, oh, so-and-so wouldn't talk to me. Oh, why would they be on my show? I have interviewed for the past 2 to 3 years, and we'll do it again this year, the high school coaches of the year. Those are big time men and women here. I've interviewed Mouse Holloway, many time national champion, Dave Smith at Oklahoma State, many national titles, Kyle Rutledge at Pitt State, many national, big time, like big time people. And I still have a little bit of self-doubt with myself. I'm always like, why would they be on my show? So my advice is give it a try. Because honestly, the only thing you're going to hear is 1 of 2 words. Well, I'll say there's 3 things you're going to hear. You're going to hear a yes, which is amazing. When that coach that you thought would never be on your show says yes, it's like Christmas. It feels great. Or you're going to hear no. Okay, that's cool. They're a loss. No big deal. Move on. There's a ton of coaches that are out there. There are a ton of coaches that would like to be on your podcast. In fact, I have a list. I think I'm at 110 of like people who want to be on the show. And remember, I only get 1 a week, right? So I only get 52. So it's like, oh, at best, you're 2 years away from being on my show. There are plenty of fish in the sea, if you will. So you're going to hear yes, it's going to be amazing. You're going to hear no. That's cool, because you can just close that file and move on. Or, and this is the dreaded one for me, you're not going to hear any response at all. The ghost, if you will. I dislike that very much. I wish they would just tell me no. I also have a lot of empathy and realize it's hard to tell someone bad news to their face, even through email, to say, no, I don't want to be on your show. So I completely get that. But again, ask and build up. So if you're going to do let's use a football show. Let's say you're going to be a football niche. Maybe don't start with Nick Saban. Maybe, I don't know. But I guarantee you would be able to get like the film evaluator for Alabama, who will introduce you to, he used to work for the defensive coordinator at, almost at a school that doesn't have football, at Troy University, the greatest university in the world. That's where I went to school. And then that defensive coordinator played football for Nick Saban, and he's still good friends with him. You got to ladder up. You ever seen that video or that example where they have the little domino and it ends up with a real big one, right? You're the little one next over the, you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. That's how it is in guest. Start with that little guy and keep working your way up. You'll get the big dogs. I mean, ever think about almost every famous person has been on a podcast at some point in their life now at this point. So just work your way up and use your, leverage, have good experiences with your guests. That way they'll refer you to other people, and just, again, just do it. Just get after it, man. Just ask the question. Don't be afraid of no, because you're going to hear it. So move on and ask the next person. You'll get plenty of yeses.
That's great advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media and your podcast app?
Yeah, so podcast is real easy, right? So if you listen to podcasts, you already know what app you're using. Just search Gill Athletics. We're the only Gill Athletics on podcast world right now. And that'll bring up the Connections podcast. I always encourage people, go through the library. There's 200 and something amazing men and women coaches there. So huge library, check that out. And then for social media, I live my life on Twitter. And I've been saying Twitter. Is it still Twitter or is it X? I don't know what it is anymore. But the bird apple still live for me. It's Twitter. And I'm at Mike Cunningham, just simply my name, no dashes, no dots, MikeCunningham. And I am a prolific tweeter, Brandon. I calculate it every year when I get my year-end stats. I think I tweet something like, I don't know, on average, somewhere between 10 and 20 times a day. I am always tweeting. And they're all good tweets, by the way. Don't think they're trash. 99% of them are actually like uplifting things like, hey, congrats on the new job, congrats on the PR, the school record, etc. My whole goal on Twitter is very much like the podcast. How can I give you value? And one of the ways that I have chosen to give value is to uplift and honor track coaches around this country on all levels, at all times, and every breath in my body.
Thank you again, Mike Cunningham, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the Gill Connections, Gill Athletics.
Thank you, Brandon, man. Again, so blessed and honored you'd have me on the show, man. I love what you're doing. Keep it up. So grateful for you, what you're doing and capturing these amazing stories. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Mike Cunningham, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.